Jacksonville is home to the second largest population of women veterans in America and the largest in Florida. But focusing on the unique needs of those veterans as they re-enter the civilian workforce is a fairly recent priority. Here to tell us about it is Amanda Conley. She herself is a veteran. She's also a therapist and licensed social worker for the Northeast Florida Women Veterans. Welcome, Amanda.
Hey, thanks, Ann. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. We're also joined by Issis Alvarez. She's program director for the Nonprofit Center of Northeast Florida. Good morning, Issis.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you both. So, Amanda Conley, you had to reenter the workforce after serving. Just personally speaking, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Right. Well, I retired from the Army back in 2007. Thankfully, I was stationed here in Jacksonville, so I retired where I was last stationed, made it a little bit easier, but there were still some challenges with that. 20 years in the Army, I enlisted at 17, so there were a lot of things that I wasn't familiar with. You know, obviously we know how the Army works. I had no idea how civilian life worked, right? It's just not something that I ever had to deal with. So learning what to wear to go to work was a huge challenge.
Oh,
I
wow.
had no clothing, right? So we have what we call transition assistance program when you leave the military, and it's a 40-hour course to teach you what we need to know. And it's like drinking from a fire hose. You only get so much of that. So no other resources existed for women veterans at the time. And I don't know as I would have been ready to take advantage of those had they been there, because I still knew everything.
Oh, sure.
The way it works, right? So, but learning what to wear to work. You buy a blue suit, you buy a brown suit, and you buy something to wear to work the first day because we understand we're going to get the job. But how do you interview? How do you translate those military skills into civilian skills so that an employer can understand that what goes on my resume, what doesn't go on my resume,
Right.
and how do we translate those things is always a big challenge. And that's still a challenge, I think, for veterans today, and especially for women veterans.
How about just interpersonal stuff in the workplace, communicating with your coworkers, communicating with your boss, or to people who work for you?
Big challenge, huge challenges, and with that military experience, we're generally taught not to ask too many questions, right? So teaching women that we can ask questions, we can ask those clarifying questions. We don't have to know everything right away. When you achieve a certain rank in the military, you have that experience that goes with that job. That doesn't necessarily translate well to this new environment. And learning how to navigate that is a challenge. A lot of women don't even identify as veterans, right? Because they don't want what I did wasn't important. I really don't want anybody to know. So we just don't do that.
Yeah.
But navigating a new work environment in maybe a situation that's different than what we did in the military while still dealing with some of those after effects of military service, we all have them. And then maybe still dealing with some of those challenges of now being at home, adjusting to different income levels, still managing those primary caregiver duties that we know, women are always the primary caregiver, whether that's children, partner, parents, whatever those new caregiver responsibilities are. Well, just managing our own mental health issues, physical health issues, some of those things can definitely be a challenge, but
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Isis, I want to ask you, this is a military community, as we said, one of the largest in the country. A lot of people serve here, but a lot of people like Amanda return here, and then they stay here. And so that's also just a well-represented population. And I think we think of ourselves as pretty attentive to the needs of veterans. I think a lot of people in this community are aware, if not hyper aware of, kind of the service that they've given and some of the needs that they might have. But it does seem that even within the nonprofit world, that focusing attention specifically on female veterans is a fairly recent focus.
Yeah, no, I would say that the beauty about the nonprofit sector is that it's essentially community members that are part of specific groups coming together to solve these big problems that are often not discussed or fully understood by the community at large. And so I would say, while there are tons of organizations in Northeast Florida, the entire Northeast Florida, that are working to support veterans in a lot of different ways, whether it be directly with veterans or trying to fix a system that veterans have to exist within, I would say there is still a huge need, as Amanda will share, that to focus on the specific groups within the veteran community that all experience both service and transition to civilian life differently. So I would say that that's where the sector really provides a unique value add to solving these problems. It's because it's the people who have experienced those problems and those lived experiences that are bringing and creating the solutions themselves.
If you're just joining us, we are talking about the unique challenges of military veterans, female military veterans who are reentering the workforce and adjusting to civilian life. If you'd like to join our conversation, if you've served or you live with somebody who has, give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. Amanda, you were talking a little bit about the various roles that women serve. And some of those are, traditional roles. Some of them are, sort of stereotypes. But, how did those impact a veteran? I mean, all of the challenges of returning to civilian life across the board, whether you're a man or a woman, can be daunting. And there are, we know that there can be there can be injuries, there can be mental health issues. A lot of veterans struggle with homelessness. I wouldn't say a lot. I would say that a lot of people who are homeless maybe have had a service background and because of some injury that they suffered or something they experienced. But do women experience those challenges differently?
We do, absolutely. And in fact, I'm not sure data currently, but I know as of last year, overall homelessness among veterans was decreasing, while homelessness among women veterans was actually increasing. So we do have those additional challenges. The biggest contributor to homelessness among women is divorce, loss of that relationship, and then affordable housing comes with that. But women veterans experience all of those same challenges. But we do experience things differently just because we as women experience things differently, right? We manage emotions differently. We manage pain differently. Women have a much higher pain tolerance than men do, as medical science has shown us. So there are a lot of things that we do handle differently, but very often we also don't know our own worth. It's very common for women to not know how to invest, right? We don't get things like that. So maybe we haven't planned as well for that transition as some of the men have. Or, we didn't get a chance to plan for that transition out of the military because we were too busy focused on taking care of everybody else. So those primary caregiver duties still all come into play. So it's a multifaceted issue. There are a lot of things that we do differently just because we're women.
Got a call from Charles on the west side. Just briefly, Charles, go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. For your veteran, I wanted to ask, when I got out in 75, the military occupational specialties had like a civilian equivalent on them. Like I was an interrogator, and my equivalent was translator-interpreter. When I got out, I was actually able to get a job translating German documents, but that was very rare. And I wanted to ask you, were the MOS codes when you got out in 2007, were they realistic? Were the civilian specialties that were next to it the equivalent? Was that realistic for you guys? Were you able to get a job in your military field?
Interesting question, Charles. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Charles. Some of those are still pretty realistic. Military police is military police. It is what it is. Same thing with an interrogator. You come in as a translator if that's the language that worked for you. But it's really, really difficult when your MOS while you're in the military is infantry, armor, artillery. Find me a really, really good civilian transition code for that, and it can become a challenge. But yeah, some of them are very realistic. A plumber in the Army, you can easily be a plumber. And the military is doing much better now, I believe, with certifications. So you can still get those certifications, civilian certifications for those jobs while you're in, if you choose to take advantage of those programs. So a lot of that onus goes back onto the service member as well. So yeah, great question, Charles. Thank you.
Isis, I just want to ask, we only have about 30 seconds left, but obviously this is a difficult time for the nonprofit world, generally speaking. How are they managing, especially, when you're talking about a niche group like military female veterans?
Well, I think the organizations that are serving specific populations are experiencing the same uncertainty that all nonprofits are, right? The funding landscape is changing extremely fast right now. And so organizations such as Northeast Florida Women's Veterans and other organizations are having to really look at what's sustainable long-term and how do we continue to be there consistently for the communities that need us. And so I would say for the community at large to really get more involved with those organizations that are in your communities and are serving the populations that you care about, because it's a whole new environment now, and organizations are trying to navigate and find more support amongst the community to make it through.
Right. A lot of need and a lot of reason to help out your local nonprofits. Amanda Conley, Issis Alvarez, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.